Have you ever looked at the outrageous prices of fresh organic fruit at the grocery store and thought to yourself, I wish I had a farm? What if I told you that the lack of a backyard is actually your biggest advantage? Welcome back, fellow gardeners and future urban homesteaders. Today, we are going to completely shatter the biggest myth in gardening, the myth that says you need acres of land, a heavy shovel, and a broken back to grow a serious amount of food. I am going to share with you 3 absolute gold mine fruit trees. These are heavy-yielding, health-boosting, money-making superfoods that unconditionally thrive on a simple apartment balcony or a small sunny patio. And the best part, they actually require less work than growing tomatoes. If you stick with me until the end, you're going to learn a container gardening secret that forces these specific trees to produce 3 times more fruit than if you planted them out in a traditional garden. So, grab your favorite drink, find a comfortable spot, and let us turn that empty balcony into a lazy, money-saving orchard. Before we reveal our top 3 plants, we need to understand exactly why trees grown in containers can actually outperform trees planted in the ground. For centuries, traditional orchard growers believed that bigger was always better. They thought that a tree needed to spread its roots deep into the earth to find nutrients and water. But here is the biological truth. When a fruit tree has unlimited space underground, it becomes lazy in a bad way. It spends years and years building a massive root system and pushing out tall, leafy branches, completely forgetting about making fruit. By putting a tree in a container, you are acting as the ultimate master of its environment. You control the exact soil composition, you eliminate competition from weeds, and most importantly, you restrict the roots. In the botanical world, a plant with restricted roots feels a gentle, natural stress. It senses that it cannot grow into a giant timber tree, so it immediately shifts its energy into survival mode. And how does a fruit tree survive? By producing as much delicious, seed-filled fruit as possible to pass on its genetics. This means your balcony pot is not a prison for the tree, it is actually a highly efficient fruit factory. Now, let us dive into the first incredible tree that loves this exact setup. Let us start with the first miracle plant on our list, the dwarf fig tree. If you have ever bought fresh figs at the grocery store, you know they cost a small fortune, usually priced per piece rather than by weight, making them a true luxury item. But what if I told you that you could grow a lifetime supply of these sweet, jam-like fruits right on your concrete balcony without ever digging a single hole? The beauty of the dwarf fig, particularly varieties like the Petite Negra or the Little Miss Figgy, is that they absolutely love to be confined. There is a common myth among traditional gardeners that fruit trees need massive amounts of deep, open soil to thrive and produce a good harvest. With figs, the exact opposite is true. When a fig tree has too much space to spread its roots, it focuses all of its energy on growing green leaves and long, useless branches. It is like giving a teenager an unlimited credit card and expecting them to study for exams. They will just party. But when you restrict the roots of a fig tree in a medium-sized container on your balcony, it triggers a biological survival response. The tree realizes it cannot grow infinitely outward, so it shifts all of its energy into reproduction. In the plant world, reproduction means fruit. By keeping your fig in a pot, you're actually forcing it to produce heavy clusters of sweet, nutrient-dense fruits with virtually zero physical effort on your part. You do not need a massive backyard. You just need the smart approach to root restriction. So, how do we set up this dwarf fig for maximum lazy success? The secret lies in the foundation, which is your container and your soil. You might think you need a massive, unmovable wooden barrel to grow a tree, but a 15 to 20-gallon pot is actually the sweet spot for a mature dwarf fig. You want to choose a lightweight resin or fabric pot because, let us face it, moving heavy terracotta around a balcony is the opposite of lazy gardening. Fabric pots are particularly amazing because they air prune the roots. When a root reaches the edge of the fabric, the air naturally stops it from growing in circles, creating a dense, highly efficient root ball that drinks up nutrients like a sponge. Now, for the soil. Do not just scoop up dirt from a yard. You need a premium, well-draining potting mix. I like to use a blend of 60% high-quality organic potting soil, 20% perlite for fluffy aeration, and 20% rich compost to act as a slow-release natural fertilizer. This creates an environment where the roots can breathe easily, water drains perfectly so you never get root rot, and the plant has a steady supply of food. It is essentially setting up a 5-star hotel for your fig tree. Once you mix this up and plant your fig, you have already done 90% of the hard work for the entire year. Now, we need to talk about watering this beautiful fig tree, and I want to share a mindset shift with you. Think of the water in your pot not as a stagnant pond, but as a flowing river. A lot of balcony gardeners make the fatal mistake of giving their potted trees a tiny little cup of water every single day. This is a terrible habit because it encourages the roots to stay right at the dry surface of the soil. Instead, we want to practice smart, lazy watering. You should wait until the top 2 inches of the soil feel completely dry to the touch. When that happens, you give the tree a massive, heavy soaking until water pours out of the drainage holes at the bottom. This deep watering mimics a heavy summer thunderstorm and forces the roots to dive deep into the pot, making the tree incredibly strong and resilient to heat. To make this even lazier, you can apply a thick layer of organic mulch, like straw or wood chips, right on top of the soil in your container. This mulch acts like a protective blanket, stopping the sun from evaporating your precious water. By mulching your balcony pots, you might only need to water your fig tree once or twice a week, even in the middle of summer. It is all about working with nature, not against it. Feeding a fig tree in a container is where the real magic happens, and it is incredibly simple. Because the tree is confined, it cannot send roots out to find new food, so you are the sole provider of its nutrition. But do not worry. You do not need a chemistry degree or shelves full of complicated liquid fertilizers. We are sticking to the lazy organic method. In the early spring, just as you see the first little green buds forming on the branches, you are going to apply a granular organic fruit tree fertilizer right on the surface of the soil, under the mulch. We call this top dressing. Every time you water the plant, that water will slowly dissolve the organic nutrients and pull them down into the root zone. You want a fertilizer that is relatively low in nitrogen and high in phosphorus and potassium. Why? Because nitrogen grows leaves, while phosphorus and potassium grow big, sweet fruits. If you give a fig too much nitrogen, you will have a beautiful green bush with absolutely no figs on it. So, a simple top dressing in the spring and maybe one more in the early summer is all the feeding this tree needs for the entire year. It is a set-it-and-forget-it system that guarantees a bumper crop of expensive fruit for just pennies. Let us address the topic of pruning, which terrifies a lot of new gardeners. When it comes to your balcony fig tree, pruning is not a delicate art form. It is simply a tool to keep the plant manageable and productive. You are the boss of this tree. Because we are growing in a limited space, we want to practice what I call the open goblet method. In the late winter, when the tree is completely dormant and has dropped all of its leaves, you simply look at the structure. You want to cut away any branches that are crossing over each other, rubbing together, or growing straight up into the center of the tree. Your goal is to create a shape that looks like an open bowl or a goblet. This allows the maximum amount of sunlight to hit every single branch, and sunlight is the secret ingredient that turns hard green figs into soft, incredibly sweet purple gems. Do not be afraid to cut the top of the tree down if it is getting too tall for your balcony. Figs are incredibly resilient. Even if you chop it back severely, it will explode with new fruiting wood in the spring. Just spend 5 minutes a year shaping your tree, and it will reward you with an organized, easy-to-harvest canopy. The final stage of the dwarf fig journey is the harvest and winter protection. Harvesting figs is a daily joy in late summer. You know a fig is perfectly ripe when it droops slightly on its stem, feels soft like a water balloon, and maybe even has a tiny drop of sugary nectar at the bottom. You simply twist and pull, and you have a gourmet treat that would cost $3 a piece at the market. But what happens when winter comes? One of the greatest advantages of container gardening on a balcony is mobility. Figs are generally hardy, but if you live in a climate where temperatures drop well below freezing, a pot left out in the wind can freeze solid, killing the roots. Here is the lazy homesteader solution. Once the tree drops its leaves and goes completely to sleep, just drag the pot into an unheated garage, a cool basement, or even push it flush against the warmest wall of your apartment building, and wrap the pot in some old blankets or bubble wrap. It does not need light during the winter. It just needs to be kept barely moist and out of the extreme freezing winds. When spring arrives, roll it back out into the sun, and the cycle of free food begins all over again. Moving on to the second money-making powerhouse for your balcony orchard, the famous Meyer lemon tree. Now, the lemons you buy at the grocery store are usually a variety called Eureka. They are thick-skinned, highly acidic, and picked green, so they survive shipping. A Meyer lemon, however, is a completely different beast. It is actually a natural hybrid between a traditional lemon and a sweet mandarin orange. The result is a fruit with a thin, fragrant skin, incredibly juicy flesh, and a flavor so sweet you can almost eat it like an apple. Buying these fresh is ridiculously expensive, but growing them in a pot is surprisingly easy. Meyer lemons are naturally dwarf trees, making them the absolute perfect candidate for apartment living. They provide year-round glossy green leaves, incredibly fragrant white blossoms that will make your whole balcony smell like expensive perfume, and heavy clusters of bright yellow fruit. Having a Meyer lemon on your patio is like having a living, breathing health food store right outside your door, ready to provide a massive dose of vitamin C whenever you need it. And the best part is, they are highly adaptable to the container lifestyle. To get massive yields from a balcony citrus tree, we need to solve the sunlight equation. Citrus trees are sun worshippers. They originally come from warm, bright climates, and they need energy to produce all those sugars and essential oils. Ideally, your balcony should face south or southwest to get at least 6 to 8 hours of direct sunlight. But what if you have a slightly shaded balcony? Here is a brilliant trick for the urban gardener. You can actually double the amount of light your tree receives by using reflection. Placing your lemon tree near a light-colored wall, or even placing a decorative white screen behind it, bounces ambient sunlight directly into the canopy of the tree. It is like giving your plant a free solar upgrade. When placing your pot, make sure it is elevated slightly off the concrete, perhaps on a rolling plant caddy or some wooden blocks. Balcony floors can get incredibly hot in the summer, and baking the bottom of your pot can cook the roots. By elevating it just an inch or two, you allow cool air to flow underneath, keeping the root zone at the perfect temperature while the leaves soak up all that glorious sunshine. The soil requirement for a Meyer lemon is slightly different from our fig tree, and getting this right is the difference between a struggling yellow plant and a dark green fruit-bearing machine. Citrus trees absolutely despise having wet feet. If their roots sit in heavy, soggy soil, they will quickly suffocate and die. Therefore, the lazy gardener must create a soil mix that drains almost instantly. You want to look for a specialized cactus and citrus potting mix at the garden center or easily make your own. The perfect recipe is 1 part regular potting soil, 1 part coarse sand or fine pine bark, and 1 part perlite. This creates a chunky, airy environment. When you water this tree, the water should cascade through the pot and out the bottom within seconds. This rapid drainage pulls fresh oxygen down into the root zone, which is exactly what a lemon tree craves. Never use a pot without large drainage holes, and never let the pot sit in a saucer full of standing water. If you master this incredibly fast-draining soil technique, you eliminate 99% of the problems people typically have when trying to grow citrus in containers. Let us talk about the most common panic moment for a citrus grower, the yellowing leaves. You walk out onto your balcony, and suddenly your beautiful green lemon tree has leaves with dark green veins but pale yellow spaces in between. Most people panic and just dump more water on it, which makes it worse. This specific pattern is almost always a sign of a nutrient deficiency, specifically iron or magnesium, which are crucial for the tree to perform photosynthesis. Because the potting soil drains so quickly, these essential minerals can wash out over time. The easy, lazy fix is to feed your lemon tree with a fertilizer specifically formulated for citrus. These special blends contain not just nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, but also the trace minerals like zinc, iron, and magnesium that citrus desperately needs. During the active growing season from spring through late summer, you should apply this citrus food once a month. Think of it as giving your tree its monthly multivitamin. If you maintain this simple feeding schedule, your leaves will stay dark, glossy, and green, and the tree will have the massive amounts of energy it needs to swell those lemons to full size. Watering a Meyer lemon requires a slightly different touch than the fig. While the fig likes a deep soak followed by a slight dry period, the lemon prefers a more consistent level of moisture, but again, never soggy. This is where the dry finger method becomes your most trusted gardening tool. Do not rely on a set schedule, like watering every Tuesday and Saturday. Weather changes, humidity changes, and the tree drinks differently, depending on if it is making flowers or just resting. Instead, stick your index finger about 2 inches down into the soil. If it feels moist, walk away. Do absolutely nothing. If it feels dry at your fingertip, it is time to water deeply. By letting the top layer of soil dry out between waterings, you also prevent the number one pest of container plants, the annoying fungus gnat. Fungus gnats lay their eggs in wet topsoil. By keeping that top layer relatively dry through smart watering, you break their life cycle completely naturally, without ever needing to spray harmful chemicals on your precious fruit. It is a win-win for lazy gardening. Here is a fascinating secret about growing fruit on a high-rise balcony. Sometimes the bees just cannot find you. If you are on the 10th floor of an apartment building, the natural pollinators might not fly high enough to visit your Meyer lemon blossoms. And without pollination, those beautiful fragrant flowers will just dry up and fall off, leaving you with 0 lemons. But do not worry, you can easily play the role of the bee. When your tree is in full bloom, grab a small, soft, clean paintbrush or even a cotton swab. Gently swirl the brush inside one flower to collect the yellow pollen, and then lightly brush it inside the next flower, moving from bloom to bloom across the whole tree. This process takes maybe 3 minutes, and it is actually incredibly relaxing. You are manually transferring the pollen, guaranteeing that almost every single flower will turn into a baby lemon. It is a tiny amount of effort that yields massive results. Plus, leaning into a blooming citrus tree to hand pollinate is one of the most incredible sensory experiences a gardener can have. Pruning your balcony citrus tree is wonderfully minimal. Unlike a peach or an apple tree that requires aggressive yearly shaping, a Meyer lemon generally knows how to grow in a nice rounded shape all by itself. Your only job is to do a little bit of maintenance. First, always remove any dead or broken branches. Second, look for what we call water sprouts. These are vigorously growing, perfectly straight branches that shoot straight up toward the sky from the center of the tree. They have huge thorns and rarely produce fruit. They just steal energy. Snip those off right at the base. Finally, if you notice your tree is producing a massive cluster of 5 or 6 baby lemons, all on one tiny twig, you need to practice the heartbreaking but necessary art of thinning. Pluck off 2 or 3 of the smallest ones. I know it hurts to remove potential fruit, but if you leave them all, the branch might snap under the weight, or the tree will produce tiny, dry lemons. By thinning the cluster, the tree pushes all that sweet, juicy energy into the remaining 3 lemons, giving you giant premium fruit. It is about quality over quantity. Now we arrive at our third and final balcony super producer, a plant that most people do not even know exists. I am talking about the dwarf ever-bearing mulberry. This is the ultimate lazy gardener's secret weapon. If you look for fresh mulberries at the grocery store, you will almost never find them. Why? Because they are so incredibly delicate and juicy that they cannot be shipped in trucks. The only way to eat a fresh, sun-ripened mulberry is to grow it yourself. Traditional mulberry trees are massive, messy giants that can grow 40 feet tall and take over a yard. But the dwarf ever-bearing variety is a genetic miracle. It naturally wants to stay small, and as the name suggests, it continuously produces fruit all season long, from late spring until the first frost of autumn. The berries look like long black berries, but they have a rich, complex, intensely sweet flavor that is packed with antioxidants and vitamins. Growing this on your balcony is like having a magical candy dispenser that just never runs out of highly nutritious organic treats. Getting your dwarf mulberry started in a container is straightforward, but you must respect its aggressive nature. Mulberries are survivors. They grow fast, and their roots are incredibly strong and eager to explore. For this plant, you definitely want a large, sturdy container. A 20-gallon pot is ideal here. Because the roots are so aggressive, they will fill the pot very quickly. This is actually a good thing for container fruit production, as we learned earlier, because that root-bound stress triggers heavy fruiting. However, it also means the soil will become dense with roots over time. To combat this, you need a potting mix that retains a bit more moisture than your citrus mix, but still drains well. A standard high-quality potting soil mixed with about a quarter part compost and a quarter part vermiculite or perlite works perfectly. The compost feeds the hungry roots, and the vermiculite acts like tiny sponges to hold on to water, ensuring this thirsty, fast-growing plant does not dry out too quickly on a hot, windy balcony. The fruiting cycle of the dwarf ever-bearing mulberry is completely different from most other trees, and it is incredibly rewarding. Most fruit trees, like an apple or a cherry, give you one big harvest window for a couple of weeks, and then you wait an entire year for more. The dwarf mulberry is relentless. It produces fruit on new growth. This means that as the branches grow longer throughout the summer, new flowers and new berries continually form at the tips. You can literally walk out onto your balcony every single morning with your coffee, pick a handful of ripe, black berries for your oatmeal, and know that there will be more ready the next day. This continuous cycle makes it the absolute perfect plant for small spaces, because you do not have to deal with a massive glut of fruit all at once that needs to be canned or preserved. You just graze on fresh superfoods all summer long. It is the definition of high-yield, lazy harvesting. Because the mulberry is constantly pushing out new green growth and swelling juicy berries, it is a very heavy drinker. In the peak of a hot summer, a potted mulberry on a sunny balcony might need water every single day. If it gets too dry, the plant will panic and drop all of its unripe berries to save itself. But remember, we are lazy gardeners. We do not want to be tied to a watering can. The easiest way to handle this is to set up a simple drip irrigation system attached to a timer on your outdoor faucet, if you have one. If you do not have a faucet on your balcony, you can use a gravity-fed watering spike. You simply attach a large recycled plastic water bottle to a ceramic spike driven into the soil. The water slowly seeps out over several days, giving the mulberry the constant, even moisture it craves. Combine this with a very thick layer of mulch on top of the soil, and you turn a high-maintenance watering chore into an automated system that keeps your berry factory running at peak efficiency. Feeding this continuous producer requires a steady supply of energy. Granular fertilizers are great, but the lazy gardener's best friend for a fruiting mulberry is actually liquid compost tea or a high-quality organic liquid fish emulsion. Because the plant is growing so rapidly, it needs nutrients that are immediately available to the roots, rather than waiting weeks for granules to break down. Once every 2 weeks during the summer, simply mix a splash of the liquid fertilizer into your watering can. It might smell a bit like the ocean for about 10 minutes, but the results are explosive. The nitrogen fuels the new branch growth, while the phosphorus and trace minerals immediately go into forming the berries. This liquid feeding method acts like an instant energy drink for the tree. It ensures that the berries harvested in September are just as large, sweet, and plentiful as the ones you picked back in June. You are supporting a marathon runner, so you need to provide consistent, easily digestible calories. Now, let us discuss the most fun part of owning a dwarf mulberry on a balcony, the pruning. With most fruit trees, you have to be careful not to cut off next year's fruit. With the ever-bearing mulberry, you can be absolutely ruthless, because it fruits on new growth. Aggressive pruning actually forces the plant to make more berries. In the early spring, before it wakes up, you can take a pair of shears and chop the entire plant back to just a few main branches. It might look like you ruined it, but within weeks, it will explode with dozens of new shoots, and every single one of those shoots will carry fruit. During the summer, if a branch is getting too long and whipping around in the balcony wind, just snip the end off. This forces the branch to fork and create 2 new branches, doubling your fruit potential. You can keep this tree tightly pruned into a beautiful, compact bush that perfectly fits your small space, while simultaneously increasing your harvest. It is a plant that actually loves a haircut. The final challenge with your balcony mulberry is protecting your harvest. You might think that being up on an apartment balcony protects you from pests, but birds are incredibly smart, and they love sweet mulberries just as much as you do. If you notice your ripe berries mysteriously disappearing, you do not need complex traps or chemicals. The easiest solution is to drape a simple, lightweight bird netting loosely over the canopy of the tree when the berries start to turn red and black. It takes 30 seconds to put on and completely deters our feathered friends. As the season winds down and winter approaches, the mulberry will drop its leaves and look like a collection of bare sticks. Just like the fig, it is quite cold-hardy, but the roots in the pot need some protection from deep freezes. Move it against the warm wall of your building, wrap the pot, and let it sleep. By mastering the simple routines of pot selection, smart watering, and fearless pruning, these 3 trees will completely transform your understanding of what is possible in a small space. So, there you have it, the ultimate blueprint for building a high-yield, lazy orchard right on your apartment balcony. We have shattered the myth that you need a huge yard and endless back-breaking labor to grow your own food. By choosing the right genetics, like the sweet dwarf fig, the vitamin-packed Meyer lemon, and the relentless dwarf ever-bearing mulberry, and by utilizing the biological magic of root restriction in containers, you are setting yourself up for massive success. Think about it. The smart choices you make today regarding your soil mix, your watering habits, and your simple pruning routines will literally save you thousands of dollars at the grocery store over the next few years. You will be walking out your door to harvest organic premium superfoods that most people can only dream of tasting fresh. If you found this deep dive into smart, lazy container gardening helpful, please hit that subscribe button and join our growing community of urban homesteaders. Give this video a big thumbs up to help spread the word, and I want to hear from you in the comments below. Which of these 3 money-making trees are you going to plant on your balcony first? And what is your biggest struggle with container gardening right now? Let us discuss it down below. Thank you so much for watching, and happy lazy growing.